We're sending more troops overseas. President Obama spoke to Bob Schieffer on CBS's Face the Nation yesterday, saying the decision to double the number of troops in Iraq, quote, sends or signals rather a new phase. He also said, and I'm quoting here, what hasn't changed is our troops are not going to be engaged in combat. Is that a mistake?
Well, you know, what he's practicing is what we saw in the Vietnam War, and this gradual escalation, him being dragged every step of the way. Remember, he always begins, or used to, telling everybody, including our enemies, what we're not going to do. Then he says we're not going to have any boots on the ground, and then we're going to have some boots on the ground, but not many, and then we're going to have more boots on the ground, but don't worry, they're not going to be in combat. I mean, it's step by step by step. And by the way, these airstrikes are pinprick airstrikes. They're not going to change the equation on the battlefield. He has said we're going to, first we're going to I've forgotten the exact words, but and destroy ISIS. Mm-hmm. We're not going to destroy ISIS with these kind of tactics. You need boots on the ground, not the combat units, but you need people who will be exposed to combat in the form of forward air controllers, special forces, trainers of the Iraqis. You need a lot if you're going to defeat ISIS. And the longer we wait, the more ISIS solidifies its position. Mm-hmm. And by the way, controlling an area larger than the state of Indiana. And for us to have one conflict in Syria and one in Iraq, of course, is the height of insanity. Do you think ISIS respects the boundary between Iraq and Syria? Of course not. This is a failed feckless foreign policy, national security policy, that unfortunately has put, we lost 4,000 brave Americans in Iraq, and we had it stabilized. But he had to pull everybody out. It was stabilized, and if we'd have left a stabilizing force, it would have stayed that way. Now we're paying a price that, unfortunately, those who sacrificed unfortunately, to some degree, we're in vain.
That's certainly a tragedy. But what do you say to those who say, you know what, we can't look like we're going in there again. We're the Americans going in and fighting Islamic State. It needs to be this sort of organic movement that's coming, even if it isn't organic, from within, not from the U.S.
Well, my only point to them is that we can't win without having a much more significant involvement. You know, in previous wars, we used to have numerous airstrikes, previous conflicts, whether it be Desert Storm or whatever you're looking at. We are sometimes, many of our sorties are returning back, not having dropped their weapons, because we don't have anybody on the ground to identify the enemy. You've got to have people on the ground, and you've got to train these people, and you've got to do whatever is necessary if you're going to defeat ISIS. And if you don't want to defeat ISIS, fine. But most of us think that ISIS is a direct threat to the United States over time. At least that's what they say.
So not worth just having sort of half an approach. In your expected role as chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee, what do you want to be doing? What do you want to accomplish?
We want to have a strategy that is driven by what our threats to our national security are, not by the budget. We want the strategy to drive the budget rather than the budget to drive the strategy. And the sequestration, which has harmed our military so much, has to be repealed.